Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, the city of Joplin has been in the news a lot lately with the results of the state audit, but there are a lot of other things happening in the city, and today we have an opportunity to visit with the mayor, Michael Seibert. Thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure, Judy.
It's been a few months since we've had the chance to visit, and of course the timing of the release of the audit, but also we're entering the fall season. I thought it'd be good to have a chance to visit again.
I think that'd be great.
Well, of course, everybody wants to know the city audit. We've had a little bit of time now for people to digest it if people haven't seen the print copy. It's a pretty thick document.
It is.
Your reaction now, having had a week or so to look at what, the public reaction, is this coming out in public?
Well, I think from a public standpoint, this is their first chance to take a look at the audit and to get into the details. And, we fully expected the public to have a lot of questions and concerns. And, as a city staff, we're going to be a much better run and a more efficient city because of the results of the audit. And we are going to be very, very transparent with how we move forward through this process. We'll make technology available on our city website so residents can monitor the progress and the communication that we have from department heads to city staff members who are now also being able to see results from the audit because of the limits of who could know about the audit until it was released. So it's an ongoing process, not only for the public to understand, but it's also, in some cases, it's an ongoing process for our city staff to go through and see if there is maybe some further explanation and background that would be beneficial as it pertains to different audit items.
And of course, when we had the audit presentation with the state auditor, there were 4 key areas that she highlighted, but this contains a lot of other things as well.
It really does. It's a very, it's a performance audit, so it looks more at more than just your financial performance. It goes into a lot of details within the city, and again, those are things that the city manager will be addressing, and if there are items that needs a resolution or an amendment that needs to be brought forward to council, those things will be brought forward in a very timely manner because we want to make sure that the things that are brought forward in the audit are definitely addressed and are addressed in a positive moving forward approach.
Well, some of the items in a historical perspective, dealing, for instance, the master developer, that was kind of a historical audit of what happened.
Right.
And, dealing with redevelopment, some of the history of, things that took place.
And those things were very well known. Mm-hmm. And, I think it would be very safe to say that that type of a process is not something we're going to be considering using in the future. We can learn a lot of lessons from that. But as far as using that as a template for projects and things moving forward, that's not on anybody's radar at the city.
Now, when it comes to operational things, when you look at the audit, it talks about financial, procurement, some of those type of operationals. Those are the things you're discussing. Staff can look at now and say, can we do this differently? You
bet. And one of the things that the audit does bring to light is the money that is still available to be requested from the federal and state governments, and we were very aware of that as a city staff, and as a council. It's important to note that for about 8 months during the audit period, our finance director, about 80% of her time was devoted to accumulating information for the auditors. So we knew we would be delayed in some of those requests from that we're still pending. We know the timetables for that. We have goals that are well in advance of those time frames. I know in my most recent update, we plan on requesting those funds that they mention in the audit by December of this year, which starts another process. But that's our portion of responsibility, and we know that we are well out in front of those time periods. But I just want to make sure that residents realize that is not a lost opportunity. Those are things that we've had to prioritize because of all of the other demands on our department heads over the last 8 to 10 months. It's a priority. We're monitoring it very closely, and the public can be updated through council meetings and through the audit website that will provide that link so they can monitor our progress through that.
So for your department heads, the people who I guess I say on the ground floor actually applying a lot of the policies
Right.
and working with things, they probably didn't have the book of the audit to look at before we did as the public.
Correct. And, they provided some input to requests, but they never saw the completed opinion of the auditors. And so that's what's going on now from a department head level. And I know the weekly staff meetings, that is going to be a priority that the city manager will be addressing with all of the department heads. So if there are any additional input or clarity that needs to be made as a result of staff seeing the audit and the response, then those are the things that will be being addressed. And also, again, they will be able to be monitored either through the link on the city's website, or another great resource that's also there is the city manager provides weekly updates to the city council members, and that information is also on the city's website, which is another great transparency that we've been doing for the last 15 or 16 months.
So the memos he sends to you as council members, the public can just click online and read
Right.
those.
It is what's happened from at his desk for the prior week, and I think there's a tremendous amount of information that's there, that's available. And I think we try to rely on a lot of the technology. I know some people don't have access to that technology, and for that, you can always come down to the city. You can always attend meetings and stay up to date, or like a lot of people do, they reach out and they call their council members.
Right. Still have that telephone
That's
for you
right.
to get those phone calls. Oh, a couple of final thoughts on the audit. As far as a timetable for, I guess the state auditor's planning to come back and review again.
That is correct, and I think it's within a 90-day period, but we will be continually in communication with the auditor's office and updating any additional information that needs to be presented, and I'm sure that they will let us know when they will be coming back to monitor our progress through, due to some of the things that they found within the audit.
So it's kind of like getting a report card, and then the next quarter comes around, have you improved your score from that grade
That's
from
correct.
a teacher's perspective
That's
or a student
correct. So,
perspective?
there's a level of accountability there for the city, and everybody is very well aware of that, and we expect to meet those expectations of the auditor.
Any concern on the council? I know the state auditor in her presentation said the words criminal investigations and so forth. What are the feelings among council members over that?
Well, I think like so many things, when you mention legal and charges or potential, those are things that we cannot comment on. But I think from a council standpoint, we take any of those accusations very seriously, especially when they're aimed at some of our own. And so I think the council in future meetings will be addressing those issues, just as we responded to the auditor and said that we will be addressing those issues.
And that's one aspect that I didn't mention on the audit report. If somebody looks online or reads the hard copy, you have your responses from the council, and I guess I call it the italics part of the report.
And I would encourage citizens to not only read the auditor's comment, but also read the city's response, because in some cases there is some additional perspective that is helpful in understanding from a city's perspective, what the auditor was commenting on.
So kind of putting things into context or something.
From the city's perspective. And I think that's important because, through this process that was not able to be revealed to the public, there was a lot of communication back and forth between the legal department of the city and the auditors, and fine-tuning some of the verbiage and the what ultimately ended up as the final document. So it was and really still is kind of a living, breathing document that we will be using to help run a more efficient city moving forward.
So you as council members and then the staff working together and looking at that and saying, well, here's something that an opportunity to work for the future.
Correct.
Tying that together. Well, this is the time of year when, we talked about finances in the audit. You're talking about finances with the council. It's budget time.
It is.
And some people may not quite understand the process for the city. You have a fiscal year that starts in November, but I guess staff has been doing a lot of work. Now it's in your ballpark, per se, that the council has to look at it.
You're right. And this past summer, it was the staff and department heads that had a chance to identify their needs, and they compiled their list of needs and requests to the city manager. The city manager and the finance director have gone through and reviewed all of the different departments' requests and their needs, and then they have compiled that into what is a preliminary budget. And the preliminary budget was brought to council. And so now we as council members, we have that preliminary budget, and it looks like the yellow pages. And so we will go through, as we always do, line by line, reviewing each department's expenditures and have discussions. And those budget meetings are scheduled for beginning September the 14th, 15th, and if necessary, the 16th. I just want to make sure everybody realizes that we're going to do them a little bit differently this year. We are going to do them out front on the dais, which means they'll be available for broadcast. And so the public will be able to tune in and watch the budget process, watch the conversations. And again, I think that's very important in the transparency of our city government.
So is that where, for instance, the department head will be there to justify why they're asking for an increase in a certain budget line or what their needs are to talk to you?
Correct. And that is part of that process. And it's a lengthy process, but it's one that council takes very seriously. And at the end, there will be a section referred to as issues and options. And those are areas of opportunities where council can make decisions on particular items. I know one of the items this year on issues and options will probably be Memorial Hall. We've had a lot of recent events at Memorial Hall that are bringing back some events to Memorial Hall, and I think council will have a discussion, if nothing else, about some line items that have always been identified for possible spending of repairs at Memorial Hall, and it ultimately will be up to council on what we do. But that's one example of an issue and option that council will be given to have a good discussion and ultimately have a vote, and we'll see what those results will be.
So budgeting is not only for the next fiscal year, but looking down the road on those types of projects, like Memorial Hall. 1 year is not going to make a difference.
Potentially.
Those things.
You're correct.
When we look at budgets, the state, the federal, well, maybe not the federal as much as the state, but other governmental, you have to keep within checks and balances, balancing a budget. In general terms, people might be wondering, well, how is Joplin doing as far as money on hand, cash on hand?
Well, we present a balanced budget. And it's been challenging in recent years to present that budget that balances. We've had to cut out some capital expenditures to make sure that we stay within that balance. That's not a long-term plan. We know that that's just a short-term plan, but those are the things that we have to do to make sure that we live within our means. I think one of the biggest frustrations to all of the council members is that I know last year we were not able to offer raises to our city staff, and I don't know that we'll be able to do that this year, but we will certainly have that discussion, and maybe there will be opportunities for us to financially reward our workforce. But that's just part of the process, and we realize that there are so many things that are out there in our future as far as growth areas within our community that haven't come online yet. New businesses, the medical school. We have a number of great things right in our very near future that potentially are going to change our budget, but until then we have to make sure that we're fiscally responsible, make some difficult decisions, knowing that that's not a long-term solution, but we're viewing it as a short-term fix until we see those opportunities that we know that are there come to fruition.
The city's budget based a lot on the sales tax revenue. So
correct.
Economy, sales, retail, all play a big role in success.
They certainly do. They certainly do. And we've recently established some new retail districts, and we're very hopeful that attracts some new additional retailers that come in that are not here. We'd love to think that we're going to tap into some of that traveling traffic on I-44 and 49 if we can get some big retail established in the southern part of the community, and that's just going to benefit the residents, but it's also going to benefit the city's budget when it comes to sales tax.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the economic side of things. You mentioned jobs coming to the community and so forth. Jobs generating people with money, but the types of jobs, how would you characterize the types of jobs we're brought to town or bringing to town?
Well, we really truly have a mix. I mean, we've got manufacturing, we've got Blue Buffalo, which has been online now for almost a year, and that is a tremendous new addition to our industrial park. Eagle Pitcher Industries they won a Department of Defense contract that they now will be manufacturing the ion lithium batteries that the military will have on the ground, and so that potentially has a lot of higher paying, more technical jobs associated with that. Turbo Supply is another manufacturing that has relocated out at the industrial park and actually doubled the size where the middle school was located. So they're just recently online. And then also Owens Corning, we were able to announce
that this summer.
Owens Corning, and they're going to make a $90 million investment out there in the old Mars plant or the old Doan feed plant, just on the western edge of the community. So those are all new jobs that are coming in. And I think the exclamation point is the medical school. The medical school will be bringing just a tremendous new direction for this community as far as how we are looked at as far as an educational community. It just expands current higher education, especially here at Missouri Southern, and I think sets the groundwork for just great things ahead for us as a community when it comes to medical school and the graduates of that medical school. Some of the numbers, once the medical school is fully up and functional, is about $100 million annually to the community. So those are things that we know are in our future, and because of that, we are optimistic of our future, and we look at things a little bit differently sometimes because we know that it is a different future than it would be if we were losing all of those businesses.
So planning for the future, knowing what those long-range goals are, those long-range accomplishments, tying into then city, not only recovery post-tornado, but the development that you have as far as infrastructure and so forth. You have those areas, you mentioned the medical school, parts of towns where you have to change some roads. You're going to have to do some infrastructure work.
Right, and we've got two revenue streams that we'll be using. One, I think people are aware of, is the money we received because of the disaster. The CDBG Disaster Recovery Fund, and Council most recently approved a new plan for allocating that money, and about $65 million of that will be designated for infrastructure improvements, sewers, sidewalks, different needs that we have. Some of it won't always be above ground. A lot of it will, in some cases, be below ground. But there'll be some visible things that we're going to be using those funds will be used for. There'll be an improvement on 20th Street and Main Street eventually, as well as a senior center, a number of other, the training center that will be next to the Chamber of Commerce. So that sum total is about well over $100 million worth of additional investment that's going to be made into the community's infrastructure. And that is, and on top of that is the capital improvement sales tax monies that we have, which is for the next 10 years, it's almost $55 million in additional monies that we will be able to be used for road improvements. 32nd and Schifferdecker heading west towards the state line is one that is targeted. We've got some areas out south on Connecticut and between Range Line and 44th and Range Line and 44th and Connecticut. Those roads are some examples of road improvements, as well as a joint project replacing low water bridge. So there are a number of projects on that capital improvement sales tax list, and those are on our website as well, so people can maybe get a sneak preview of where the next
coming
orange
up.
cones will be.
Well, as you drive around town, we see plenty of orange cones, and that's continuing to be. And all these projects that you're mentioning, they were decided on through a process, whether it was citizens' input with the sales tax or the process of deciding what's going to be with the relief funds. You know, the council you got the end of the line as far as here's what people have proposed, now would you guys approve it?
That's correct, and that is a very lengthy process, but it's lengthy especially when it comes to disaster funds for a reason, because we've got to make sure that those funds are correctly allocated, and that's why we have Deloitte, which is the group that oversees this process, because it is so critical that we do this process and we do this process correctly, because at the end of the day, if we don't do it right, we don't get reimbursed for that money, and at the end of the day, that's what makes us make sure that we do this process correctly.
The federal government has a big checklist, and you have to make sure everything's checked.
That's correct, and it extends the process, and I apologize in advance to the citizens that we don't move as fast as people think we should, but at the end of the day, I think it's very important to do it right.
Is that one of the challenges from a council perspective, is people want to see things being built? You know, they see open land, it's like, when is something going to happen?
That's probably been our biggest weakness from a public standpoint. Now, you see it from a private standpoint, but from a public standpoint, it's harder for the citizens to see what we've accomplished publicly post-tornado. But there are examples of that. You know, one of the best ones is Joe Becker Stadium. The money the city's committed post-tornado, it wasn't tornado money that was at Joe Becker Stadium, but that was an example of committing and having a project there. And I think a lot of folks have enjoyed Blasters baseball this summer, but we've got other groundbreakings coming up that we're very excited about.
The new library coming soon?
The new library groundbreaking we can actually talk about, because it is scheduled for September the 12th. And so people will see dirt moving on very shortly thereafter at 20th and Connecticut. And towards the end of fall, they will actually see construction begin on our $25 million library that is very exciting, a great addition to our community, and I really still hope that we can put together a commercial development next to that like it was always designed for, and hopeful that we can still do that as well.
So work is still going on behind the scenes on things like that development, and the people aren't hearing about, but there's still talk and plans being worked
That's
on.
correct, as well as some opportunities potentially at 26th and Main. I think that opportunity has been discussed a little bit in the media, as well as the request for proposal again for the memory care facility at 26th and Maiden Lane. And it's our hope that the partners that were involved with the master developer are still interested and are going to come forward with additional proposals that will hopefully put that project back on track. And so we can have that facility there that we really think would be a great addition to the community, especially those families that are struggling with treating family members that have Alzheimer's and issues like that. I think that would be something that would be a great addition to our community.
And as we know, our population's aging, so that's going to be a challenge not only in Joplin, but across the country, and those types of things. Well, looking at what you have in front of you now as mayor, there's a lot of projects going on. How would you just describe Joplin between now and the end of the year? You know, what was we wrap up, 2015, how would you describe that?
Well, you know, Judy, I really have to think that we've got a lot of things in front of us that people are going to enjoy. You know, the most recent things we've got this week, we've got the last homestand for our Joplin Blasters. They're in contention, their first year to be in the playoffs. This coming weekend, we've got boxing back at Memorial Hall. We've got additional great events from a cultural standpoint. But I think moving forward also, people will begin to see a lot of projects really starting to move forward from a construction standpoint. It's my hope that we see some success in landing some additional retail in some of our newly developed retail zones that we've passed. So I really see that there is a lot of great things to be very proud of, very excited about. Joplin still, through all of our tragedy, has still been the example of how to recover from a disaster that we faced.
And you mentioned earlier in the program citizen involvement. John Q. Citizen, someone who's watching, how can they get involved, or what do you encourage, what do you say to him or her?
Well, if you have access to the internet, obviously from the city's website, there is a wealth of information there. But if that technology isn't something that you're comfortable with, you can pick up the phone and call the city and ask questions. The city manager is a great resource. He responds to emails and phone calls. I would encourage people to reach out to council members. We get tremendous amount of requests and questions, and we pass those on to the city manager, and they get responded to. So that is communication. That's one of the things that we really strive to make available. I would say if somebody really wants to see what's going on, come down and sit through a council meeting or two. We've got a lot of boards and commissions that people can volunteer for, depending upon their expertise and their backgrounds. This is a great community to be involved in, whether it's with the city or an event, a group like Connect to Culture, or the Downtown Alliance. We've got so many different groups that are so active and so passionate about the success of this great community. It's really a lot of fun to be involved with. We just saw this last weekend, Zirkapalooza.
Right, the downtown.
We had 70 bands at 8 venues in town, and then we had Slide the Slide, a 700-foot water slide, and this is all done privately, and I'm just so proud of all those, John Buck and his group, and then also partnering with Downtown Alliance and all of the volunteers. It was an absolutely huge success, and I can't wait to see the other things that this group and groups like them bring to the community to give our citizens additional things to do here. That's something that we've always heard for a number of years, that there's just nothing to do. Well, I don't think you can say that anymore. We have a lot of things to do. We have always, we always strive to improve and offer more. The skate park's a great example to that. You got, if you're a skater, you're in heaven now, because you got a great facility to do that. So I'm very proud of what we're doing, and I'm proud that we rely on citizens' input for our direction, and encourage those to reach out to council and to city staff and just begin a dialogue.
Well, Mayor, I'd like to thank you very much for visiting with us today, providing some information for our viewers as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station.